Brian Doyle.
I'm Tim McNeil.
And I'm Robb Rogers.
And welcome to the latest installment of MSP Business School. Hey, good afternoon, guys. Really excited to be back here today. We've got a fun topic we're going to talk about today.
Yes.
In a few moments, we'll introduce to those of you that are not already seeing him on YouTube, our guest for the day. But guys, this one's going to be about cyber liability. And if there's something that I see in my mailbox every single day,
all the time,
it is questions about cyber liability. Am I protected? How do I get protected? What does it mean? And why are premiums so high?
Yeah.
And hopefully our guest today will be able to share some of those answers for us. But with that, like I always say every week, nobody's here to hear us. They're here for our guests. So I'd like to introduce Doug Kreitzberg from Seedpod Cyber. He's the principal over there. And, he is one of the cybersecurity masters working with the community that we all live in, making sure that we've got ourselves protected and we're protecting our customers as well. So with that, I'd love to welcome you, Doug. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, Brian. Thank you. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and your listeners.
Well, we love to kick things off, Doug, with first getting to know the person behind the service. So maybe you can share with us a little bit about your background and, how you found your way into the crazy world of supporting the MSP community.
Right. Well, I started in technology, spent many years in insurance, and ended up in kind of a blend of technology and insurance. I began writing code for an insurance organization, and then ended up running the organization as a result of what we were doing from a marketing perspective with technology. And while I was there, a couple things occurred that kind of led me to create Seedpod Cyber. One was I got to be one of those CEOs who got the call from their CIO who said, "Doug, there's been an incident." Ooh. And of course, I was one of those CEOs who said, "Well, take care of it and let me know when it's done," only to find myself in weekly and then daily meetings with forensics, with legal, with our IT, trying to figure out what happened, what could have been exposed, how did it happen, what data, what's the definition of PII, et cetera. And, we're a large company. We had the resources to address it, but at the same time, we were selling insurance to small and medium-sized businesses. And I wondered how the heck could they deal with what we just went through? And at the same time, those businesses, we were trying to sell cyber insurance to those businesses, and they weren't buying it at the frequency that I thought that they should. And when I asked the managing partners or the principals why, there seemed to be two reasons. One is they didn't understand the insurance, which in and of itself is understandable because it is remarkably opaque. And then two, they really didn't know how to talk to their IT provider about the digital risk. They figured that they were on top of it. And they also figured, I'm not Target or Home Depot. Nobody's going to care about me anyway. So I thought there was really an opportunity to kind of create a value chain from service to insurance. And as I looked at the marketplace, I realized the vital role that MSPs play in terms of the digital infrastructure to America's business, or actually the world's business, and that they really serve as that last mile in. So if I would create an insurance program, I really needed to figure out a way to work with that group of businesses, because they would enable me to get insights into the security posture that I could then, sharpen my pencil, so to speak, from an underwriting perspective and provide better coverage and better pricing. And so that's what we've done. I left the organization, started up Seedpod, and we partner with managed service providers to provide insurance to their clients, and we also provide insurance to them as well.
Very good. I love that part about, the question mark that's out there, right? I know when cyber liability was first coming up in conversations, there was a lot of thought from folks, even myself included to an extent, hey, how does this differ from the errors and omissions insurance that I'm already subscribing to over here? what is the big difference? Because isn't this just a general error or omission just from a technical perspective? And obviously it's much more than that. But these are some of the questions that were certainly presented to me as my customer, and certainly myself. I'm like, well, where's the line in the sand? So I'm not either over-insuring or under-insuring myself in the process.
Right, right. From a managed service provider's perspective, there is certainly a relationship between the tech E&O component, the professional liability that you purchase, and the cyber liability, because you are naturally in a technology related field. The differences can come into play in two areas. One, on the liability area, the nature of the actual claim could be arising outside of just the actions that you, or the negligence or omissions that you do as a provider. It could actually even come from a third party that you're working with, the door was open for the bad guys to get through you, and then ultimately them. The other area is there's the cost that you then have to pay yourself to restore your systems, to notify if you have to do crisis management. Those kind of first party costs are not included in the E&O portion. Your tech E&O only responds from lawsuits.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where most of the losses are. Most of the losses in cyber today is on those first party costs, not only for managed service providers, but also for businesses in general.
Yeah, and those costs are sometimes tough to define, are they not?
Tough to define. They can be tough to define. When you're looking at first party costs, there's a number of areas in which they're going to arise. One is if it's a data breach, and what are the costs there's the forensics costs, understanding what happened. There's the kind of remediation costs. How do we restore our systems and fix it and get back up and running? And then there's the kind of the cost of dealing with our customers. So sending out those letters or those credit monitoring if it's a data breach, or managing reputation if it's a ransomware attack, or if there's an e-crime event, if someone spoofs you and gets your controller to wire money to someone who isn't you under false pretenses to make the payments there. The biggest areas, and actually where a large part of the dollars go, is in what's called business income loss. So if you have a ransomware attack and the average time that a business is down is 26 days, if you're down a month, that's potentially a month's loss profits for you. And that's where you need to make sure that you've got the accounting right to demonstrate what your losses or increased expenses were to respond to that claim.
Right. Now,
So you're able to come in on behalf, you're working with the MSPs to make sure that their clients are squared away in case an incident like this happens.
Right. What we basically do is we integrate our underwriting criteria with the tech stack that the MSP is most likely already offering their clients. And so if the clients are on that tech stack, they're technically approved for coverage through us, and then they're eligible to save on top of that there. And then we support the MSP, really helping them be that digital risk manager for the organization. They're talking to the organization every day about their systems and the strategy with regards to what they need to do. Obviously, cybersecurity is becoming more of an issue that the businesses are looking to the MSP for, and we help provide them with an outlet for insurance. We don't want them to sell insurance, certainly, but an outlet for insurance, as well as information to help them understand where is the puck going with regards to cyber insurance, so they can best, put together their product and solutions to address that ahead of time.
All right, so Doug, just real quick here. So it's not embedded in the stack. It's not embedded in the tech stack. It's a separate policy based on every MSP client. And when they're interested, they go to the MSP who sends it to you, and then that's how the three-way relationship is built.
That's correct. Yep.
Gotcha. Okay.
Makes sense.
Yep.
Makes sense.
Yep.
Got it.
Yeah. And then for the MSP itself, we go through an assessment process of that MSP, and we use that information. That information helps us, understand, how best to work with them and their client base. But we also use that information, which is much richer information, so to speak, than what you typically would be on an application. And that helps us get, preferred terms for the MSP itself.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay. All right. So because you're so well set up, you're able to essentially or you're able to lessen the burden from a financial aspect because of how well you're set up operationally.
Right.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
What the MSP provides is they give us a behind the firewall view, which is different than what the rest of the market, where the rest of the market is, the cyber insurance market, who are, that they rely on the application, they rely on the drive-by scanning that is done. And that behind the firewall view gives better comfort to the carrier to be able to sharpen their pencils on the pricing there. And we do the same thing for the MSP in getting that look behind the firewall of their own environment to help better address their risk needs through insurance.
Sure.
So basically, this is a deep dive vendor risk assessment of the MSP.
Yeah.
And the better the MSP performs there, their customers can benefit by getting a lower premium, which is certainly an interesting selling proposition.
Yeah.
An MSP is going head to head with somebody else.
Right.
By being able
That's
to share
huge.
that, and hey, look, we've been vetted by XYZ, and by doing that, this is, we can commit to that as long as you're doing the steps that you're doing and come under our blanket, that you can save some money as well. That's a great selling proposition for an MSP. And
It's
Yeah.
fantastic selling proposition.
Yeah, and we've found we even are helping. We've learned a few things certainly as we've been doing this. One thing we've learned is we've been helping the MSP get their clients further up the tech stack to be secured by leveraging insurance. We play the bad guy, so to speak. So I can have a conversation with their client to say, hey, you really need to get that EDR in place. This isn't, and I can explain to them why, from an insurance perspective there, and get them to understand this isn't table stakes anymore. This isn't nice to have. This is table stakes now from an insurance perspective. And also, we can talk about the potential savings that they could have if they do take that EDR. And then that helps the MSP then solve that solution that maybe they haven't been able to get over the hump with a few of their clients. So that's another role that we play through that.
Perfect. That's that's definitely, it's taking something that needs to be done anyway, and then taking it to the next level. And certainly, every MSP is looking at seals of approval. There's a lot of initiatives out in the marketplace. CompTIA's got something called Secure Trust that, is coming into play to help MSPs be able to separate themselves from some of the competitors. So, awesome, Doug. That's a great concept. I've got a question maybe you can share, kind of the answer to, because one of the things that's always a bit of a mystery to me when it comes to, how to protect the downstream impact, right? We had a leading industry vendor a couple of years back, without naming names, that, had a pretty big, security event. That, of course, cascades down to the MSPs, who then suffer business loss, and then cascades down to their customers because of the infrastructure. So you've got 3 tiers of risk engaged in this process, but also 3 tiers of potential fallout from one originating source. How do people best protect themselves against that? And what does that look like to the insurance industry? I know it's difficult to write a premium if you really don't know what that extended risk is going to look like until it actually happens.
Right. Well, I'll address the last point first, because from the carrier's standpoint, when they look at MSPs, the phrase that comes to mind is aggregation risk. That from one comes many, from one claim, one incident comes many claims. Because just as you described, there's kind of a waterfall effect that starts at one point and then starts spreading out as it goes down the line.
Mhm.
And many carriers have decided really over the past couple of years to get out of writing managed service providers altogether. And those that have stayed have either drastically increased rates, reduced coverage, or in most cases have done both. From the standpoint of the managed service provider, there's a few things that we counsel our partners to pay attention to. One is, and from a technical standpoint, you really need to make sure you've locked down your RMM and where you're storing your client credentials, the document management system, that they need to be strict access control, role-based access. You don't want your level ones to have God rights over access into the RMM, as an example. You want to make sure you're managing your dormant accounts. Certainly when an employee leaves, make sure you get them off. And that you're locking down and getting alerting off of your client credentials, so that if someone's getting in there from an IP address they shouldn't be, that you don't recognize that you're aware of it and dealing with it. So that's the technical aspect. The other aspect is the contractual aspect. So the relationship that you have with your client, and making sure that you're limiting the liability as much as you can contractually which you need to pay attention to with your MSAs. And then the third component, which is really there's actually two additional, but it all falls around the rubric of your basically account management or client relationships. The trust that you build up over time is really critical when an event occurs. And so things like, suing for fees, be very cautious of doing that for any number of reasons, but certainly from the standpoint there's a correlation between that and lawsuits coming back to you. The other thing is, in all MSPs, I shouldn't overgeneralize, but they do want to help their clients. And that's what you exist for, right? You exist to help them with their technology. So if a bad thing happens and it, even if it came through your system, you want to go fix it. Well, you have to be very careful of just jumping in there, fixing it without letting your carrier know what you're doing ahead of time. Because you don't want to do two things. One, either incur additional risk by going in and trying to fix something and muddy the forensics waters while you're doing it. The other is you don't want to spend all that time fixing it, getting up and running, and then going back to the carrier saying, hey, I took these costs to do this, and the carrier saying, well, we're not going to pay you because you didn't ask us for permission up front there. So those are a few things to kind of think about. It's not going to eliminate that aggregation risk. We're all in business, and part of business is taking risks. It's just, how do you manage it most effectively, mitigating it, and then obviously insuring it.
I know, in speaking to a lot of MSPs at a couple of conferences I've been to that have gone through, a breach and respond type process, they've really stepped off the wheel once they've identified it's a security breach, knowing that the insurance company is going to want to come in and, have built that into the response playbooks too, because there's usually a gap, a time gap as one team steps back and another one assembles. But, realistically, they only have a certain ceiling of knowledge as well, and it usually makes sense to yield to the response experts at that stage as well. And it's what you pay for, right? In your premium.
Yeah, and I would we always recommend and we'll do for firms, we'll help the MSPs if they would want it, but doing an incident response simulation, having someone come in and really run through something with you as an MSP, that's very valuable. It's always easier to sit down in the calm of an afternoon, deal with an issue where you can see the birds out flying outside, and instead of when the ransomware is hitting the fan, and you got to address it and figure out where's my IR plan. Oh, it's a system that's encrypted. So, and then what do we do next? And what does the carrier do? Do I call my lawyer? Do I call their lawyer? Who's our IR team? Those tabletop simulations can be impactful.
I'm a big
Oh
fan
yeah.
of the tabletops because it really helps you understand what you need to do tactically and get that part down so you can deal with the human.
Yep,
Which is really
absolutely.
where the problem becomes when it's going on. It's the personalities that are standing around you and not the work you have to do. Rob, you were going to jump in with something? I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying, like, it's just so smart because the natural tendency for the IT professional is to solve the problem,
Yeah.
right? Just
Yeah.
jump in immediately and help. And now it's just, and especially under a stressful situation where your client calls you up and they're in a panic, so puts you in a panic, and then you have to remember to step back, right, and call your provider instead of, or your insurance provider, instead of calling the client and saying that we're going to be over there in 5 minutes. So yeah, that's it's a very smart thing, Doug. It's very
Yeah, it
smart.
really is. That's an entire mind shift for a lot of these MSPs. They're just not used to it, especially if
Right.
they're
In a
new
stressful,
to, yeah, especially if they're
And
new to the world.
it really requires defining your internal security operational team as well, because you got to have somebody to call the shot and tell them to stop, because inherently that engineer who's at the helm, they're not experienced enough, seasoned enough to make that decision for themselves. And to both your points, Tim and Rob, they want to help. That's all they're genuinely trying to do in that situation, right?
Yeah.
So, you do have to have a hierarchy, a communication process, and
Yeah.
all that, definitely can be part of your tabletop exercise. So
yeah.
so you can get there. But I know the
Sure.
MSP community is still struggling with how to build that truly into their plan. But we only got a few minutes left, but I do have one other question, and then we'll talk a little bit about how people can get in touch with you and where you're going to be. But how are you seeing some of the state regulations that are coming into play really impacting the premiums and some of that as well? Right here in the great state of Connecticut, and I say that a little tongue in cheek, we were one of the first ones to implement the ability that if you implemented one of the approved frameworks into your system, show that you're actually managing your POAM and executing as you outlined, you can't be held for punitive damage. Is that becoming a favorable stance for the insurer, because now there's a little bit more box around, how deep that waterfall can go?
Yeah, it certainly helps. As a lawyer, friend of mine once said, it only costs $10 to file a claim by walking to the courthouse and paying a fee and filing for suit. So anyone can sue you for anything. But at the same time, if you're following a framework, following the state regulations, it does help you as you move through any potential litigation process. And those regulations are there. There's also the privacy regulations, and I think we're going to see a little bit more heat around privacy as we move forward. The FTC has come out with regulations as well that's going to impact a number of industry segments here. And the SEC itself for public companies has come out with regulations. So businesses and MSPs as well who are following those regulations, and there's some nuances and differences certainly to them, but it's pretty much, let's pick a framework that's appropriate to our risk, and let's follow it and make sure that we can demonstrate that we have been following it. That's going to go a long way to mitigating your liability on a go-forward basis. It won't remove it, certainly, but quite frankly, it's also a good way just to mitigate your risk, period. So these are sensible actions, but that's where the MSP, with regards, speaking to businesses, I wish, the IT infrastructure that we had when I was a CEO of that other organization was coming to me and saying, here's where, here's what you need to be doing, and speaking in a language that I could understand there. That's where I think MSPs have a great opportunity to help lead their clients in taking these frameworks, these regulations, and breaking them down into A, English, and B, into reasonable kind of a roadmap, if you will, so these businesses can see, yes, we can get these in place and we can do it in a prudent fashion that's also reflective of our budget and other business needs.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yep,
So,
that's good.
Okay, yeah, very interesting.
Fellas, we're coming up to the end of our time here. You know, before we kind of part ways, are there any closing thoughts, Brian, Tim, or Doug?
well, Doug, I'd like to hear a little bit about where you're going to be out and out and about, and where MSPs can connect up with you, and and if you're going to be at any of the shows or events or things that we all tend to go to. Love to hear that.
Sure, sure. Well, I'll be speaking at this will be more of a webinar basis with Ingram in May. Slated for May 24th, and then I'll be at a IT Nation Secure as well. So that's in June coming up.
You know, you're going to be a popular guy at the
I was
bar.
going to
for
say
sure.
that is probably that is
Yeah,
gonna be fun.
yeah.
That will be a
It's
good
kind
one.
of usually when you say you're in insurance, people are running away, but with cyber insurance,
Yeah.
it is a hot topic for I think good reasons too.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right.
Brian, anything here before I close us down here?
No, this has been, very informative. A lot of the questions that I've had were answered today, so I appreciate that, Doug, and look forward to seeing you out on the road.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate this conversation. It's been great.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Doug, we thank you for joining us here today. For anybody that is looking to get in touch with Doug, we will be including his LinkedIn profile with the podcast. Also, please remember this episode will be up on msbbusinessschool.com and anywhere that you do get your podcast, to include YouTube. So please jump over to YouTube, like and subscribe. We'd appreciate it very much. Brian, Tim, Doug, I appreciate it. You guys have a fantastic day.
Yeah,
Thanks,
great
Doug.
having you on,
Thank
Doug.
you.